Imagine, if you will, that someone aims to speak to you about religion or politics, and their sole purpose is to change your view. Most people completely shut down or refuse to see the good in the arguments for the other side because they are too busy tuning the arguer out. Lincoln understood this. His goal was to keep the Union together and abolish slavery. Had he come right out as a proponent of abolition, he would have never been elected as President of the United States or any other political job. Lincoln pulled the people of the 1860s around to his point of view very slowly. He placated the border states publicly as he privately worked towards the abolishment of slavery. Lincoln was a true politician. He was always trying to give his audience what they wanted to hear, while still making a means to an end.
Lincoln gave the address on colonization on August 14, 1862. At this point, he had already written the first draft of the Emancipation Proclamation and had already read it to his cabinet less than a month before. Publicly, no one was aware that the proclamation existed. In my opinion, this address on colonization was twofold. The first is placating the border states. He does use some racial connotation. The second was to ask the blacks for their opinion on the issue of colonization. Make no mistake, he was trying to persuade the black delegation to choose colonization, but only because he believed it would truly benefit both races.
On August 14, 1862, Lincoln met with a committee of black men to discuss the idea of colonization, although it became more of a speech than a discussion. Lincoln explained to the delegation that he had been given some money for the colonization of those of African descent. He said he understood they may ask why. He answers them.
We have between us a broader difference than exists between almost any other two races. Whether it is right or wrong, I need not discuss, but this physical difference is a great disadvantage to us both, as I think your race suffer very greatly, many of them by living among us, while ours suffer from your presence. In a word, we suffer on each side. If this is admitted, it affords us a reason at least why we should be separated.
Lincoln explained he believed both races suffer, but especially their race, simply by having to live with the white race. He then asked if those in attendance were free men, and they replied with yes.
Perhaps you have long been free, or all your lives. Your race are suffering, in my judgment, the greatest wrong inflicted on any people. But even when you cease to be slaves, you are yet far removed from being placed on an equality with the white race. You are cut off from many of the advantages which the other race enjoy. The aspiration of men is to enjoy equality with the best when free, but on this broad continent not a single man of your race is made the equal of a single man of ours. Go where you are treated the best, and the ban is still upon you.
In this paragraph of the speech, Lincoln expressed his fear that even when slavery ceases to exist, they still wouldn't be treated equally. Colonization, in Lincoln's eyes, was giving them a chance to leave the inequality behind.
I do not propose to discuss this, but to present it as a fact with which we have to deal. I cannot alter it if I would. It is a fact about which we all think and feel alike, I and you. We look to our condition, owing to the existence of the two races on this continent. I need not recount to you the effects upon white men growing out of the institution of slavery. I believe in its general evil effects on the white race. See our present condition. The country engaged in war. Our white men cutting one another's throats, none knowing how far it will extend. And then consider what we know to be the truth. But for your race among us there could not be war, although many men engaged on either side do not care for you one way or the other. Nevertheless, I repeat, without the institution of slavery and the colored race as a basis, the war could not have an existence. It is better for us both, therefore, to be separated. I know that there are free men among you, who even if they could better their condition, are not as much inclined to go out of the country as those who, being slaves, could obtain their freedom on this condition. I suppose one of the principal difficulties in the way of colonization is that the free colored man cannot see that his comfort would be advanced by it. You may believe you can live in Washington or elsewhere in the United States the remainder of your life as easily, perhaps more so than you can in any other foreign country, and hence you may come to the conclusion that you have nothing to do with the idea of going to a foreign country. This is, I speak in no unkind sense, an extremely selfish view of the case.
At this point, we have to remember that Lincoln was a self-made man, meaning he left his family behind completely to go out on his own. He didn't think it was asking too much for the black community to do much the same, however, with the comfort of their friends and loved ones. They would be able to leave everything they knew, including the torture and being treated as second or third class citizens, and the injustice and prejudices by leaving and going with their families and others like them and starting their own colony. According to Philip Shaw Paladin, Lincoln wrote to his friend Mary Speed in 1841 about seeing slaves being sold. He wrote, "They were being separated forever from the scenes of their childhood, their friends, their fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters, yet they were the most cheerful and apparently happy creatures on board." Colonization was not asking them to leave anything but the familiarity of their land behind. In his experience, this is better than what many former and current slaves had to do. However, many free men were not on board with this idea. Lincoln, always persuasive, goes on.
But you ought to do something to help those who are not so fortunate as yourselves. There is an unwillingness on the part of our people, harsh as it may be, for you free colored people to remain with us. Now, if you could give a start to the white people, you would open a wide door for many to be made free. If we deal with those who are not free at the beginning and whose intellects are clouded by slavery, we have very poor materials to start with. If intelligent colored men, such as are before me, would move in this matter, much might be accomplished. It is exceedingly important that we have men at the beginning capable of thinking as white men, and not those who have been systematically oppressed.
This is a bit of a guilt trip. You are free. You have it easier than those who are not free. You need to help them. If you incredibly intelligent black men agree to leave with your families, it will first open the door for slave owners to free their slaves. Then those freed slaves would follow you in all of your wisdom to the new colony. He goes on to guilt them some more, even trying to compel them to act as George Washington would have.
There is much to encourage you. For the sake of your race, you should sacrifice something of your present comfort for the purpose of being as grand in that respect as the white people. It is a cheering thought throughout life that something can be done to ameliorate the condition of those who have been subject to the hard usage of the world. It is difficult to make a man miserable while he feels he is worthy of himself and claims kindred to the great God who made him. In the American Revolutionary War, sacrifices were made by men engaged in it, but they were cheered by the future. General Washington himself endured greater physical hardships than if he had remained a British subject. Yet he was a happy man, because he was engaged in benefiting his race, something that for the children of his neighbors having none of his own.
Then Lincoln begins giving ideas of where they could go and advantages and disadvantages of each. An English teacher would be impressed with his use of counterarguments within his persuasion.
The colony of Liberia has been in existence a long time. In a certain sense, it is a success. The old president of Liberia, Roberts, has just been with me, the first time I ever saw him. He says they have within the bounds of that colony between 300,000 and 400,000 people, or more than some of our old states, such as Rhode Island or Delaware, or in some of our newer states, and less than in some of our larger ones. They are not all American colonists or their descendants. Something less than 12,000 have been sent thither from this country. Many of the original settlers have died. Yet, like people elsewhere, their offspring outnumbered those deceased. The question is, if the colored people are persuaded to go anywhere, why not there? One reason for an unwillingness to do so is that some of you would rather remain within reach of the country of your nativity. I do not know how much attachment you may have toward our race. It does not strike me that you have the greatest reason to love them, but you are still attached to them at all events.
In these last few sentences, Lincoln understood they may want to stay closer to the United States. He also acknowledged their poor treatment at the hands of whites, questioned why they would want to stay here, but understands that this is their home. He then gave another colony option closer to their home.
The place I am thinking about having for a colony is in Central America. It is nearer to us than Liberia, not much more than 1/4 as far as Liberia, and within 7 days run by steamers. Unlike Liberia, it is on a great line of travel. It is a highway. The country is a very excellent one for many people, and with great natural resources and advantages, and especially because of the similarity of climate with your native land, thus being suited to your physical condition.
This paragraph is both empathetic to the blacks as well as racist, keeping the border states on his side. He explains that he has kept the blacks' thoughts and wishes in mind while he simultaneously explains that Central America's climate is much like Africa's, so they will enjoy it, which is odd since in the last paragraph he understood the United States was their home and is now calling Africa their home. However, this is also 1862.
The particular place I have in view is to be a great highway from the Atlantic or Caribbean Sea to the Pacific Ocean, and this particular place has all the advantages for a colony. On both sides there are harbors among the finest in the world. Again, there is evidence of very rich coal mines. A certain amount of coal is valuable in any country, and there may be more than enough for the wants of the country. Why I attach so much importance to coal is it will afford an opportunity to the inhabitants for immediate employment till they get ready to settle permanently in their homes. If you take colonists, where there is no good landing, there is a bad show, and so where there is nothing to cultivate and of which to make a farm. But if something is started so that you can get your daily bread as soon as you reach there, it is a great advantage. Coal land is the best thing I know of with which to commence an enterprise. To return, you have been talked to upon this subject, and told that a speculation is intended by gentlemen who have an interest in the country, including the coal mines. We have been mistaken all our lives if we do not know whites as well as blacks look to their self-interest. Unless among these deficient of intellect everybody you trade with makes something, you meet with these things here as elsewhere.
Lincoln is looking out for the colonized. He is setting them up to go somewhere where they can prosper immediately. They will be able to get into trading with other countries and immediately make money. He said all men, no matter their race, look for self-interest, and this would be of good economic interest to them. He wanted to persuade them to choose colonization, not only because it would make the white anti-abolitionists happy, but because he believed it would benefit the black.
If such persons have what will be an advantage to them, the question is whether it cannot be made of advantage to you. You are intelligent, and know that success does not as much depend on external help as on self-reliance. Much, therefore, depends upon yourselves. As to the coal mines, I think I see the means available for your self-reliance. I shall, if I get a sufficient number of you engaged, have provisions made that you shall not be wronged. If you will engage in the enterprise, I will spend some of the money entrusted to me. I am not sure you will succeed. The government may lose money, but we cannot succeed unless we try. But we think with care we can succeed. The political affairs in Central America are not in quite as satisfactory condition as I wish. There are contending factions in that quarter, but it is true all the factions are agreed alike on the subject of colonization, and want it, and are more than generous than we are here. To your colored race they have no objection. Besides, I would endeavor to have you made equals, and have the best assurance that you should be the equals of the best.
Again, Lincoln is trying to keep his white voters happy and saying he isn't sure if the colony will succeed. There are places in Central America that would not be happy to have the colony there, but they are small. He also tells them that success won't depend on external help, although he will give them help, but on self-reliance. Besides, they will treat the blacks more as equals than they would have here.
The practical thing I want to ascertain is whether I can get a number of able-bodied men with their wives and children who are willing to go when I present evidence of encouragement and protection. Could I get 100 tolerably intelligent men with their wives and children to cut their own fodder, so to speak? Can I have 50? If I could find 25 able-bodied men with a mixture of women and children, good things in the family relation, I think I could make a successful commencement. I want you to let me know whether this can be done or not. This is a practical part of my wish to see you. These are subjects of very great importance, worthy of a month's study, instead of a speech delivered in an hour. I ask you then to consider seriously not pertaining to yourselves merely, nor for your race and ours, for the present time, but as one of the things, if successfully managed, for the good of mankind, not confined to the present generation, but as, from age to age descends the lay, to millions yet to be, till far its echoes roll away into eternity.
Lincoln concluded by asking them if this was something they were interested in doing. He asked them to think about it and get back to him. The chairman said they would get back to him in a short time, and he said, no hurry at all. 6 days after he met with the black leaders about colonization, on August 20th, 1862, the black leaders came back and said they did not want to leave the Union. After that, Lincoln never spoke of colonization as a possibility again. In his final speech on December of 1865, he said,
Liberia and Haiti are, as yet, the only countries to which colonists of African descent from here could go with certainty of being received and adopted as citizens, and I regret to say such persons contemplating colonization do not seem so willing to migrate to those countries, as to some others, nor so willing as I think their interest demands.
Many authors, like Bennett Jr., believe this speech showed Lincoln's racism. I disagree. First of all, it is important to understand that Lincoln's colonization was not deportation, meaning it was not forced. It was strictly voluntary. Secondly, colonization was an idea that helped Lincoln save face with the border states and anti-abolitionists. Blacks were not thought of as equals. If they were freed, according to many whites, they could not be treated as equals. Lincoln would send these black people away, and whites wouldn't have to worry about how to treat them now that they were free. However, for Lincoln, colonization was something he thought would be welcomed by blacks. They could get away from the mistreatment. He addressed a group of black leaders and essentially asked them if this is something they wanted to do. When they came back with an answer of no, Lincoln dropped it and began working on ways to have a two-race community. Later in Louisiana, according to Fonner, Lincoln said he would prefer that limited black suffrage be implemented. He singled out the very intelligent, meaning educated free blacks, and those who served our cause as soldiers most worthy. Again, he was slowly opening up his idea of equality for blacks. Slowly, so people can slowly accept his ideas. Of course, at this point in time, only white males owning land had been allowed to vote for the better part of 100 years, which would make it difficult to get suffrage implemented for blacks.
Lincoln began his career by gradually implementing and stating his ideas about slavery so as not to be completely shut out of the government and tuned out by the people. They gradually and slowly listened to him and his ideas. He slowly converted millions of Americans to his way of thinking. We will never know how he would have gradually implemented the equality of blacks. Colonization was not Lincoln's racism. It was quite the opposite. He encouraged them to be decision makers in their own future.